Focus Evaluating the Essentials by Stephanie Kessler, Caitlin Petrie, Kaylee Sigmund, and Amanda Williams. Introduction. The author's opinion is definitely debatable. Some teachers like to use extra technology and materials to teach in their class, while some teachers feel that extra support distracts students from learning the basic core information. The author's view points towards more basic concepts of all standards and doing things basics for students to learn the easy concepts. Chapter 1. 3 elements that we should approach with simplicity and diligence. What we teach, how we teach, and authentic literacy. What we teach should be basically understood curriculum with topics that is collected from many different teachers and based on what is most important for the students. How we teach comes back to the teachers. Teachers go to college and become trained to teach, but some are just better at it than others. They have a natural instinct. To start off, here are some good tips. Have structurally sound lessons that include the basic formally lessons that educators have taught for decades, such as simple academic work. Do not overload your students with work and explain things short, simple, and to the point. Use lots of examples and let your students ask questions. Authentic literacy is what I just talked about, but it involves how to hold the two topics together in all subject areas. So basically, have yourself organized in your classroom. Have simple, organized lesson plans, nothing too complicated that will confuse yourself or even your students. Teachers should know their classroom and how their students learn best. Power of clarity, simplicity, and priority. The power of these 3 are unlimited. Teachers can always improve on anything they teach because every year they have new students. Clarity and simplicity are very common. Clarity means to understand something, and simplicity means to simplify something so clear that your students understand it. So your students have to learn the basics of information and be fully clear on how to use them or what they mean. So make this easier for your students to understand. Simplify your curriculum and your lesson plans. Then there is priority. So put your priorities together when it comes to teaching your students. Things that have big impact or that they need to know in order to do the next lesson. For example, multiplication is something students need to fully understand before moving on to division. Chapter 2. Curriculum. A guaranteed and viable curriculum matters immensely. Curriculum may be the single largest factor that determines how many students in a school will learn. Strategies for curriculum. There are 3 steps or strategies in order to achieve an effective curriculum. These strategies include adequate amounts of essential subject area concepts and topics, intellectual and thinking skills, authentic literacy, purposeful reading, writing, and discussion as the primary modes of learning both content and thinking skills. College readiness. Any student can be college material. You don't have to be brilliant, disciplined, or intellectually oriented to go to college. All high school students should have academics that prepare them for college regardless of their future plans. Fundamental knowledge is absent from curriculum to help prepare students for college. We need to redirect toward simple, obvious tasks such as reading, writing, speaking, and thinking.
It has been known for decades that the highest achieving countries teach fewer than half the standards we teach. It is mentioned that we should eliminate about 2/3 of our standards.
Chapter 3. How we should teach. Teaching is something that does not need to be complicated. The book that goes through great pains to get across the point that school systems today often involve too much nonsense and not enough effective learning strategies. Anyone is capable of teaching common elements that students need to learn in classes. Students become confused when there is too much information presented and they do not have time to focus on each topic that is reviewed in class. Effective lessons. According to our author, essential portions of a good and sound lesson include things such as a clear learning objective, teaching and modeling, practice guided by the instructor, frequent checks that students are understanding what they're being taught, and independent practice. The impact of effective lessons. According to our author, students would learn 4 times as fast if effective lessons were consistently used in schools. Effective lessons could also add 6 to 9 months of additional learning growth per year, and the use of these lessons are about 10 times more cost effective at reducing class size. And effective teaching could eliminate the achievement gap in about 5 years. Chapter 4. More than any other subject in school, language arts has lost its way. It is in desperate need of clarity. We need to simplify English language arts standards because state standards and assessments have had a destructive effect on English. Students are not allowed adequate time to focus on what truly matters in English. Unfortunately, teachers now primarily focus their reading classes on worksheets. Rather than doing these pointless worksheets, students should be spending 90% of class time on reading and comprehension skills. Reading literature. Reading has incredible value. All too often, teachers take out reading when almost every other subject in school focuses around it. Reading skills will assist students in the development of other skills in every other subject in school. Chapter 5. Social Studies with Reading and Writing at its core. According to our author, social studies and history enlarge us as literature does. Both help us to understand ourselves. They must have authentic literacy at their core to be truly effective in schools. Literacy as the core. Social studies, of course, requires great and in-depth reading on behalf of students. Teachers must resist the urge to focus on worksheets in social studies classrooms as well, or students will not gain the knowledge they need. Our author says that social studies educators need to break from the fads and aim for a reading-based curriculum in social studies. Writing in social studies. Students should write 10 to 12 short papers per school year. These should be written in class in an open book manner. Papers should be done mostly in class with the teacher checking for student understanding. Other sources would greatly add to the curriculum in social studies as well. Things such as short biographies, current event articles, and other sources. Reading about and discussing current news and events would be exciting to students according to our author.
Chapter 6. Content. Science lessons should be focused on content. We learn content best by evaluating and analyzing its meaning as we learn. The mastery of essential content is learned mainly through interactive text, lectures, and discussion. Students need engaged with core science ideas. For students to be able to learn at advanced levels, they need to be given opportunities in class every week to read science-related texts, discuss and write about the content of the text. Fewer science labs. More content is learned through reading textbooks. Labs should connect deeply with the content being taught. Surprisingly, research shows students learn more science content from slow, close reading than the participation in a lab. The highest science achievement occurs in counties that allot less time doing lab activities and more time actually teaching the content.
Creating assessments. Creating assessments. Assessments include a certain amount of multiple choice items. Gives students the opportunity to argue, explain, and draw their own conclusions. Questions to ask yourself as a teacher. How many students succeed on the end of the unit assessments? How to give examples of unit questions and writing assignments. Explain and illustrate essential similarities and differences. Chapter 7. Making math meaningful. Simplifying math standards. About 80% of the overall workforce, including those in the highest of pay scales, will only ever use subtraction, addition, multiplication, and division for their job. That's only 30% who will ever only use algebra. What schools should do: have teams create learner standards maps for every math course at every grade level. Become truly obsessive about the use of academic teaching strategies. Get the basic essential math concepts down before moving on to the next.
Reading and math. Tables showing week-over-week movie scales and production costs, demographic and quality of life statistics for various cities, states, and countries, statistics for athletes. All these could be real-world mathematical thinking. A single word such as a or the can result in a misunderstanding while reading a math problem. Mathematics is the most difficult content area material to read because there are more concepts per word, per sentence, and per paragraph than any other subject. Writing and math. Writing allows us to see conceptual relationships to acquire insights. This doesn't give them a sense of the underlying principles of the operations they learn in this way. When students are asked to explain or evaluate a solution or algorithm in writing, they come to a clearer, deeper understanding of a formula's meaning and application. One middle school of 186 students were given multiple opportunities to explain and problem solve in writing as they learn math concepts. Employers will always seek graduates who can interpret data and can communicate effectively about quantitative topics. A math expert writes, "I can no longer imagine teaching math without making writing an integral aspect of students' learning." Writing in math class requires students to organize, clarify, and reflect on their ideas. Some schools have formal written assignments for graduation projects into their math curriculum. Analysis. The author's arguments are based on sound pedagogical principles because of all the examples of techniques he gave to do better with the teaching of each subject or as a whole. The author's statements add to discussion in the area. Everything in the book that was mentioned could be discussed among others. The holes in the argument of the beliefs could be that the fact that the techniques were stated in the book are the author's ideas. They were the author's opinion. Some educators may not think the same way about how to teach their students and what is best for them.
Implications for the classroom. As a reader, I think other readers could get a lot from this book. The author gives good examples for how to teach each subject with simplicity and clarity. It makes sense to focus on the basics and not get too complicated with academics. For example, the author talks about having effective lessons. He gives examples saying to have clear learning objectives, demonstrate for your class, and have guided practice, then assess to see if your students understand.
We recommend this book to all educators. Although the author repeats himself throughout the book, it allows you to further grasp his concepts. We feel the book can be helpful to all educators, but mostly middle school and high school students. His ideas about learning seem to be directed more towards older students.
If you take a moment to read the above quotes, you'll see that the authors of these articles all agree with the claims in our book, Elevating the Essentials. Cunningham and Stanovich agree that reading is of utmost importance in early childhood and throughout adulthood. They contend that children who are exposed to much more reading opportunities are more likely to succeed than those children who have little reading exposure. In our author's book, he spends a great deal of time discussing how schools today have far too many standards that overwhelm teachers and their students, thus taking away from the overall learning experience. Although he does not discuss Common Core in his book, the same idea of too many standards bogging down the school system is supported in the last educational article. Robbins claims that standards put in place, such as Common Core, may not even have an educational, but a political goal in mind instead. Sadly, with these standards in place, education is taking a turn for the worse.
Works cited. Picture sources. All pictures were retrieved from Microsoft Word 2010 clip art.